Good morning, afternoon, and evening to many of you. Thank you very much for being part of Questions About Autism Answers That Works. We have a fantastic program. As you know, my son, Tyler McNamer, is the author of Population One, Autism Adversity and the Will to Succeed. He's also the founder of a company called Autism Works that puts on this program each week. And has a wide variety of different programs that are available to help make autism more workable. We also have a series of where we interview different parents. We actually have a parent, Holly, that's here as well. So Holly, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's see, you might have to turn on your microphone. There might be that little blue button. That way we can hear you.
There you go.
Otherwise, you're going to have to use sign language, which folks may use as well.
Well, thank you for having me. Can you hear me now?
I surely can. Yeah, that works out great. So again, thank you very much for joining us. Really, the whole goal of this program is to really provide information, strategies, and those things to help make autism more workable. And especially we as parents, oftentimes autism is so isolating that rarely do we get a chance to sit and kind of talk together. So again, thank you, for that. And we'd love to just hear a little bit of your story as relates to autism. So yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. Well, I have 4 children, and my story actually starts with Noah. He's my ASD son, his older brother. So his older brother was diagnosed with a genetic condition called 22q deletion syndrome. And him and his brother are only 18 months apart. So with Roman being my first child and having a lot of these health issues and us trying to get to the bottom of that diagnosis, and then his brother coming soon after, I didn't have a very good baseline as a new mom and, new parent, and kind of missing a lot of milestones and the delays with his older brother kind of overshadowed what was going on with Noah, just 9 months behind his brother. So we got the diagnosis for Roman, and then I kind of shifted my attention to Noah, and I thought, well, if Roman wasn't hitting his milestones like he was supposed to because of this reason, then there's something going on with Noah too. So initially, considering his brother has a genetic condition, we went that route first to see if maybe something was passed on to him as well, or what from a genetic standpoint. And we had all that testing done, and it all came back clear. So for a while, we were just going with just a generic diagnosis of significantly delayed.
PDD or something.
So we got him established with like Babies Can't Wait and the early intervention therapies and all of that, and then finally into the school on an IEP. And it was at that point, it was becoming more and more obvious as the language wasn't progressing that he more than likely was on the spectrum. Sure enough, we got him tested here in Atlanta, Georgia, and they confirmed that diagnosis.
Yeah. So tell us about that process, right? You have Noah has an older brother. All of a sudden you kind of change that attention. How, you realize, hey, maybe something's up. Tell us about that diagnosis process for you, how that works for you personally. Tell us the diagnosis specifically.
So when his brother was diagnosed, his brother is a very, can be a medically complex diagnosis. And I already had that kind of thinking, like, when Roman was diagnosed, we got a piece of paper and a plan, and this is how you are going to approach this diagnosis. So, which I found comfort in. I like a plan. We have a plan.
Yeah.
But when we finally got to the bottom of what was going on with Noah, And we ruled out a genetic condition. We went and saw the geneticist and did all that testing. And then we went and did, like they do like a neuropsych eval to get the official diagnosis of autism. At the time, they didn't really want to pursue that until he was 4-ish. And that's when we did it and we got the diagnosis. But what was so surprising to me, having gone through getting a diagnosis for his brother compared to him, was we were told he was on the spectrum. We were given some recommendations of maybe what to do, but that was pretty much it. There was no plan. There was no team of doctors. There was no like long-term, short-term goals. It was just a diagnosis and that was it. And it was, some people can't wrap their mind around me feeling almost more insecure in an autism diagnosis than something that's rare, like Roman's diagnosis, because you really feel like you're kind of left to your own devices. Like, where do I go from here? That was the biggest part for me. I'm very like, let's make a plan, let's make a list. I'm an A-type, so on and so forth. And it was a lot of like me trying to find out, well, what worked for you, or how is this for you, and trying to see how that might help us. And there was no cookie cutter solution after the diagnosis.
Yeah. It's interesting. We, and Tyler was diagnosed when he was 3. And back then, he's 24 now at the time of this treatment. Back then, there really was no resources. We basically had to come up with everything. And what's so fascinating about that is that, it's really not that much different now, because Noah is he's 10 now.
Yeah.
So when you think about that diagnosis when he was 4, correct? You would have thought in that time that there really would have been, okay, well, hey, here's the protocol, right? Here is kind of the plan. But I think it also speaks to every one of our children is so different, on the spectrum too. And so the approach is always different. So tell us about the approach then. So you got the diagnosis, it didn't come with an instruction manual,
Yeah.
So what was your path then to say, hey, I've got to find the tools in order to be able to help Noah, progress? What did that look like for you?
Well, I would say even before we knew officially that he was, on the spectrum, early intervention. I think it's so key not just to wait around for a diagnosis, to just meet your child's needs as they present themselves. So as soon as the language wasn't coming, we went in and started doing speech therapy. And then with the OT and the PT and all that. And that's what I tell so many people is like early intervention is so key. There's so much that supports that. And I'm thankful that I didn't wait around for someone to, tell me that he had autism, or that I just went with that instinct. Well, it doesn't matter. What matters is he's supposed to be talking by now. So we're going to go ahead and meet that need right now. And I think too, as far as with early intervention comes with the therapies, we've done that since day one. And that works for us. That works for Noah. He just loves his therapist. Those are his best friends. And he's made a lot of improvements, having that one-on-one time and meeting those goals. And so that's been extremely helpful as well. But I would say, like, I feel like I can't imagine when Tyler was diagnosed, I feel like now there's so much awareness, and a lot of people are definitely aware of autism. But you're right. I don't feel like, as far as like a more of a manual, for lack of better word, more of
protocol. Yeah.
There's still nothing out there, and that can be hard. But for us, early intervention was key. as well as keeping up with all of those things, school, doing, getting him an IEP, getting him into the appropriate classroom setting. He thrives in it. And that's what's worked for us. But again, like you said, every child is different, and autism can profoundly affect kids in so many different ways. And that's what makes you feel so isolated in this journey, because you can't be completely certain what worked for one person is going to work for you. So that can be hard.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, because you're just so spot on. And it would be nice to say, okay, well, if autism presents this way, here's the sensory work, or the OT work, or speech work that needs to happen. But each one of our children just progresses at a different rate, is able to process sensory, at a different rate. I mean, it really becomes this complex set of too many variables to kind of write the protocol. But one of the big things that you said that really struck me, which I think is key, is that you said something to the effect of, in my gut, or my intuition was telling me, right, this is what. Can you expand on that? Like, you just knew, as a parent. Tell me a little bit about that feeling and why you felt so passionate about that gut of what you knew that Noah needed.
I think, as soon as it was undeniable to me, there was no turning back. My child had a need, and I was going to meet that need. And I think truly all parents have that gut feeling to a certain degree. Yep. I think just some struggle with, I don't even know if it's accepting, because I think we all go through that period of time where it's like
the bomb goes off and you're like, oh my God.
Like, do I address this now, or can we, wait, or, but for me, and everything that I had already experienced with his brother, I just knew that the earlier we could intervene, no matter what was going on or the reasoning, the better the outcome would be in the long run. And, I contribute a lot of that thinking to having his brother and having gone through what I did with his brother as well. I didn't have like that secure, baseline where, his brother hit his milestones at this age, so then he should hit his milestones at this age, and, blah, blah, blah. But I did know if there's something going on, it's best to address it as soon as possible. And, and as far as like that gut feeling that you have, whether it feels good or not to address it. And I feel, at the end of the day, we're all just trying to do what's best for our children. Yeah. And even though sometimes these kind of things don't feel very good as a parent, you really have to push past that and look past that. And, it might not be what you planned for, and it, this may not be how you thought your parenting journey was going to unfold, but that doesn't change the needs that are present at this very moment. And, you work through those emotions, and you work through those feelings. And I believe you eventually get to a place where, you gain that strength, you meet those needs, and you do what you need to do for your child. Because of course you would. Why wouldn't you,
Yeah. Well, and oftentimes, and it is overwhelming. And I guess if you kind of take a look at the graph of emotion, right, you have the times when it's just desperate, when you're called into the school and, all of a sudden, you are dealing with behavioral issues, or, Tyler would be standing up on the desk or eating staples, becomes self-harm issue. All those things. And you're like, oh my goodness, I just thought we made some progress. And then, but I think the other key point that you brought out, which is a really powerful one, is that we have these expectations, right? We have these ideals. We have this picture as parents of what we think should be. But the reality of it is it's not that way. And that comparison against the ideal is where this gap creates a really bad place. And I know as a dad, when when he got his diagnosis, I mean, immediately, right? I'm a guy, so I just want to fix things, which is typically the way to do it. And dealing and confronting with emotion. Who wants to do that when I can get into action and just fix things, and I don't actually have to deal with those emotions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But when I stopped trying to fix Tyler to my ideal and just accepted, okay, I needed to provide this framework of success, I actually really did become a dad, to him at that point. And I think that is a really, really big thing. So you talk about, the emotions of autism, and another key point, which was at the end of the day, we're all looking for to help our child, right? To help our child be successful. So how did you translate that into school, right? Because I honestly believe that teachers and your parapros and OT, speech therapists, all of that, they all want the best interest of your child, but oftentimes we get involved emotionally and think, well, man, maybe they're not getting the services. How did you navigate that? How did you work through that?
When Noah first he got an IEP and was put in the schools, it was tough for me because now I have my two children and they're both on IEPs and they're both in special education classrooms at two different schools, because we all know how that goes. One school could meet this kid's need and that school meets others. Yeah. And my boys were only 18 months apart, and it was challenging, and then when here they go into the school system at 3 years old, right after their third birthday.
Yep.
And they're just these little babies going into this big school, and they have these needs, and and it just doesn't feel right to take your children to school that young. And it was hard for me. It really, really was. But soon, it did not take that long, I started to see them make progress. Noah especially, I mean, he just thrived off of, and still does, structure and repetition and, a sequence of events. And, on this day we do this, that, and the school could provide that for him. And it just gave him a lot of security, a lot of peace. And when I started to see how much it was really helping him develop and then, of course, be able to learn in that environment, I thought, okay, this is best. Yes, again, it didn't feel that great at times. And, and I often worried and had those fears, like, is all these people around him, do they have his best intention at heart? Is he safe? Yeah. It's a struggle giving a child who cannot speak for themselves to somebody, and then come home and not know for sure if they, what went on that day, Yeah. So, I mean, and even to this day, I still, try to feel teachers out and schools out. But again, like we talked about before, going with your gut,
Exactly.
Gut is what, it's not, that gut feeling is not going to let you down. And we have been extremely blessed with wonderful teachers and therapists, and and I hear stories where, for other families, they've had different issues, but for us, I mean, I can't say enough good things about those who have been put into Noah's life and helped him get to the place that he is today.
Yeah, that's super. And it's interesting. That was Tyler's journey for us as well. The teachers, the school district, amazing. I mean, the support was amazing. And I think one of the keys to success for us is from the outset, we knew that we had to create this vested relationship. Like, we always remembered, that everyone at the table was interested in one thing, which was Tyler's success, right? It's like, how can we create that framework to be successful? And even in those emotional times when, we felt like there had to be certain resources that are available and maybe they weren't available inside the school district, we just went out and looked for other resources, other community grants, those things to find what we needed. And so we didn't rely on the school district to do that. We worked in concert, with them, to do that as well. So you had mentioned, that, and there's a wide variety of people that are on this program right now that have children that are profoundly affected by autism. We have some that have now aged children, in their 80s, that still are very profoundly affected by autism. And then we have some that are maybe the way autism presents has less of an impact, still social issues, but not, verbal communication issues. We're always very, very careful, not only as parents, as families, at least, and definitely inside of Autism Works, is that we are not labels, right? To say, okay, well, wow, they're, mildly autistic, or, we don't do that, because we may look at our children and say, wow, people have mild autism, wow, they have it. And the reality of it is that we have no idea how autism actually affects, Tyler may present one way, but he has significant challenges in other areas. So where this big, long question actually is coming is that, tell us about Noah. So tell us about, how autism specifically has affected Noah, and then what challenges that creates both inside your family, but then also in the school or social settings.
Mm-hmm. For Noah, I would say the biggest challenge has always been language. So the language skills that he currently has, it took a long time for him to acquire. And it was never an issue of Noah being able to understand.
Yep.
He can understand everything. I mean, even from a very young age, we tell him we're going somewhere. He understood. We asked him to do something, he would do it. That was never an issue. It was more from him getting from here to here to tell us what he needed and what he wanted.
Yeah.
And as he got older, he would get more frustrated with that.
Yeah.
He still has moments where he gets frustrated not being able to completely verbalize his thoughts or ideas or what he wants. But Noah has a very independent way about him. Which I'm thankful for, but at times, we have to keep an eye on him.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll call it like the world according to Tyler, right? I mean,
but language, and he's gotten to a place where he can tell me what he wants. We still struggle with the, who, what, where, when, why questions.
Yep.
But, I would love to see him be able to acquire more conversational type skills, so that way when he's out in the community, he can have more of that dialogue. And that's what we're striving for when he works in therapy and at school and whatnot. And aside from the language, we've seen as he's gotten older, getting more and more maybe obsessive, because he's so rich in his structure in his day. And he does fairly well should plans change, but there is a process to get him to accept it. And these are things that we're trying to give him the appropriate coping skills now, so that way, as he grows, he's able to, in spite of how it may affect him, be able to cope with those feelings more appropriately. He's had some issues over the years with more outbursts, but again, I think it always comes back to him not being able to verbalize what he's saying.
Frustration. Yeah.
And he always has been so remorseful. It's almost like he's gotten to a breaking point, but he doesn't like being that way, So it's hard to see your kid, struggle, but then not want to hurt you in the process, and then feel sorry. But but we're working with him to try to help him gain those skills and coping skills. And and then I think, to kind of tie in with what you're asking me, as he gets older, Noah's a big boy. He's 10, but he's tall and he's sturdy, and and he's growing rapidly. But in the last couple of years, as he's gotten older, it's becoming more evident to other people that he's on the spectrum.
Yeah.
And that presents, I feel like, some challenges pertaining to him. We have people, because, he doesn't look like he's, has autism, whatever that means. So,
right.
People talk to him and then kind of be taken back when the response isn't, what they anticipated, or, children as well. They kind of see this big kid and they don't understand. Whereas when they're all like 4, 5, 6 years old, oh, he's not interested. I'll move on to the next friend,
Mm-hmm.
So that, I think, presents some challenges for him as well, because, as he gets older, there's certain expectations others are putting on him, without even realizing.
Yeah. Well, and we'll talk in just a little bit about this whole idea of social shaming, right, inside of his peer group. But then even as parents, right, we experience social shaming from our peer group because they don't understand, and again, it really becomes an education thing. But before we talk about that whole social shaming concept, tell us specifically what strategies you're using to equip Noah emotionally, because I remember with Tyler, and he still goes through this, by the way. So like when Tyler goes and speaks, and he speaks across the country now, there's a very specific process that we have to go through in advance to make sure he's comfortable with the room, that he knows the sound system, it's literally, I mean, while it's not a written checklist anymore, it kind of was when he first started speaking, because now he's a little bit more acclimated. But this whole topic of speaking, he understands the context, but every venue is different. And so making those transitions is very challenging. And then from an emotional perspective, or just stimulus perspective, after he gives his presentation, he literally goes back to the hotel and unwinds for 3 to 4 hours. Happens to be in the bathtub, right, with the lights out, because that's how he can gather him. So that's kind of an example, at least at the time of this taping, at 24, those are his coping strategies. When he was 10 or 12, it was holding him tight when he was melting down, and it's funny, there's so many similarities, because Tyler would be the same thing. He still talks about it in his webinars where, he didn't want to do those things, but he also was frustrated, and the stimulus built up so much that he just, he couldn't help it, and no amount of stimming would change that, for him. And it was heartbreaking as a parent, to see that. And now understanding that. So we had specific strategies that we've used, and we've shared those, hundreds of them over on these webinars. But what specific strategies have you used, that you're currently using, and then other ones that you're thinking, man, we need to kind of really explore these as he grows up? So what are these strategies?
Well, Noah has always responded very well to like reward type. I'm working towards a reward. And a lot of that probably comes from him being in therapies at such a young age, and just having this, like, this is the goal and this is what you're working towards, kind of way of learning. And initially, we would use food, like with most toddlers, and, as a motivator for him to, complete a certain task, or meet a certain goal, or whatever we might be asking of him. And that his favorite foods would be his rewards. The only issue with that, as he gets older, and especially with a lot of obsessive type things going on, food is not the best idea, because now, we're having to really actually monitor a lot of what he's eating. Noah is a sensory seeker, and he constantly needs input.
Mhm.
He's more on the, the flapping and the jumping and the spinning and
Right. Yep.
um, and and he always loved to put stuff in his mouth, including food.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
That's that
so
oral
now
stimulation. Yeah.
yeah, so now he's older, and now I have a real concern, moving forward as he gets older and even into his adult life, his relationship with food.
Mhm. Yeah.
So we really had to reevaluate how we use food as a reward for him.
Mhm. Yep.
Um, so we really moved away from that. Now we focus more on instead of per se like giving him something to do. Let's say Noah really loves elevators. That's his
Huh.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, now we can't take him to go ride an elevator every single
Sure.
day,
Yeah.
although he loves that. But we can say, on Saturday we can go to this particular elevator,
Mm.
or and that he understands the concept because he'll say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and we'll
Yeah.
say that's
Yeah.
right. So he understands like, okay, if I stay on this path, Saturday will come and we'll go to the elevator. So
Mhm.
that has proven to be much more, I think, not only healthier, but also gives him the concept too now that I don't always get an immediate
Right. Delayed gratification. Yeah.
yeah. And I think that's a much better way to go about it. Now, when you also are promising that you're going to take your child somewhere, especially your child on the spectrum, and that doesn't work out,
Yeah. That's a tough day. That's a tough day. Yeah.
problem. And and that's and that happens sometimes. You can't help that, and you try really hard for that not to happen. But that's a great opportunity to try to again implement those strategies. The plan has changed. Maybe we
Yeah.
can't go on Saturday, but we will go tomorrow. So Noah is very like activity oriented, to go to see the elevator or to go swing at the park, or like I said, he is a busybody. He needs that kind of we're doing this and we're doing this and we're doing this.
Yeah.
But how that can be applied to him in his adult life, I still kind of go back and forth in my mind. We don't live in a society where you're constantly being rewarded.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need to do. Most times you just need to do what you need to do because you have to.
Mhm.
And so it's a constant like you want to prepare them for independence, and you want to prepare them for the real world, for lack of better words. But in the same token, we also live in Noah's world, and
Yeah.
things are done a certain way in that world, and
That's right.
and so it's like this constant balance. I'm trying to prepare him for adulthood, and I know you're steps ahead of me, and you know what that's like.
Yeah.
But at the same token, I don't always want everything to always be about you gotta. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like just
Well,
this
yeah. Yeah.
pressure.
Yep.
Still
No,
10.
yeah, that's exactly right. And it will, I mean, it happens, and that's this whole thing of, well, it happens organically. I think if we look at our typically developing, children, that may become a little bit easier for them. There may be a little bit more of an organic component because they can, start reasoning on that world around them maybe a little bit more rapidly than our children that have autism. But at the same time, we also can reaffirm those organic situations so we can create I talk in terms of, Tyler created all these disparate files, and I think you mentioned, wires, right? And so we had all these disparate files, and what we do as parents is we just tried to, literally have him create thousands, 10,000, hundreds of thousands of disparate files in the hope that one day he would start connecting those files. And that took a long time. I mean, it wasn't probably until he was 12 or 13, that he started to start connecting his world. But had he not had all those disparate files, he wouldn't be able to pull those things in. And even to this day, this whole motivation issue is really challenging, because Tyler has a very specific routine that, he has a company now, he has speaking engagements, so there's variability in the schedule. But every morning at 7:45, we have or excuse me, 8:45, my bad. At 8:45 in the morning, we have a discussion for 15 minutes and review his schedule for the day. And by the way, that schedule is at least 85% the same every day. And if it's not, it ends up being a pretty challenging day. And at least as parents, even at this day, we're trying to help Tyler gain that independence. But I think that independence is always going to be in the construct of structure and repeatability. And it's the workability in that repeatability. And the other thing specifically on rewards, which I think is fascinating, so Tyler will always talk in terms of, if he can successfully achieve his schedule, he will get a reward at the end of the day. It happens to be like, now he'll go and get a hot chocolate at his favorite little coffee house, right? And which has also been really interesting, seeing him start to develop social skills in what would be a very traditional. And it was interesting seeing him first start going to the coffee shop, because it was just a new file for him. But then he started observing others. And it's been a really interesting social experiment for him that he's been doing now for a year, and he's starting to see some of the similar people. And then the other thing too is he goes to the post office, of course, every day. And it is quite because he puts a lot of books every day. But all the people at the post office know him. He has a regular routine. And I think because I've often asked him, Tyler, do you want to give up, just shipping your books? Because he's very busy with other things, right? And he could just sell a lot of books and then have somebody else ship for him. And he doesn't want to give those things up, because that's part of his routine. And that's a touchstone and a security for him. So I think, of course, as Noah grows up too, you'll find those things that become the socially appropriate security. I kind of call them touchstones, right? And even in Sims, because Tyler would flap his hands and he'd bang his head and he'd pull his hair, and then he moved to pulling his hair on his wrist, and so now he's still stems, right? But he's used as more socially appropriate ones. Like he's got a little fit meter. It's a Nintendo. It's kind of like an egg, that tracks like your fitness and stuff, right? So those are his socially appropriate ones, and he'll still kind of rub his neck and things, but it's not. He's trained himself that way. So I guess where I'm going with all of that is I think there's always going to be some type of reward portion of this. And that reward does transition over time, right? So maybe it's food, maybe it's, a video game, maybe it's whatever. And quite frankly, it really doesn't matter what it is. It can just go overboard, and it can end up being a really challenging thing. And so, and we didn't figure that out because he always kind of wanted to be on the computer. But then what we figured out after a lot of pain and trial and error is that we did have to introduce quite a few different rewards that also were standard. So anyways, I'm kind of off the tangent on that. But I think this whole, how do you modify behavior from inappropriate to appropriate, from expected or from unexpected to expected? I mean, it's a challenge. I mean, it's a real challenge for us. So let's talk a little bit about this whole concept of just shaming, being accepted at school. You talked about challenges. He's now 10 years old. People are starting to notice, wow, you just don't look autistic. Look like you have autism. I love that one. Right? It's like, honestly, you want me to show you right now?
Yeah. Yeah.
So Um, so and I talk in terms of like our confidence is under attack all the time, because whether it's people in the community, people that are well-meaning but just are clueless, don't have the education. How did you deal with that kind of social shaming or not being able to accept things? And then also, how do you think Noah is tolerating those things as well?
Mhm. You know, uh, I still have moments that catch me off guard, and I kind of like, for real. But in the beginning, I had a lot more of those. When you're in the beginning, your senses are heightened to everything around you. You just feel so insecure as a parent, as in meeting your child's needs, how the world perceives them, and your senses are so heightened and you're on such like high alert that I can see looking back that my response to certain situations may not have been as necessary.
Constructive, yeah.
Your guard is so up, you just
Yeah, yeah.
have so many fears in your mind of what everybody else is saying or could do, or God forbid would want to do or whatever. And just a constantly on guard. And it got to a place where it was like, I'm not effectively educating other people about my child.
Mm-hmm.
I take every opportunity to just, be upset. I can't, you know, reduce the stigma that's following him around or our family around in general. If one, I shut people down or get sassy or whatever the case may be. And also too, as you're on this parenting journey, I'm not a perfect person and there's no perfect parents and we're all learning. And just as I had to learn to offer myself that certain level of grace, like, get through this, we're going to learn together. I had to learn to extend that same type of grace to other people. Honestly, I mean, I was not no autism expert. I'm still not prior to Noah. You know? And how easily could it have been me possibly assuming things or making ignorant statements? I didn't have any knowledge of autism before Noah. So when you kind of take yourself out of your emotions and really, really look at everything else, the bigger picture, it really just came down to, for the most part, nobody wishes harm or has ill feelings towards me or my child. And ignorance is not always intended to hurt someone, but we should be looking at it as an opportunity to educate a person. So when I got to that place, truthfully, my life as a human being got a lot easier and a lot more peaceful. And when I got to the place where I could offer myself that same grace as well, I felt more relaxed as a parent as well. And I encourage so many other special needs parents too, especially in the beginning, to kind of really look at it that way, or try to, shift their focus from, what this person said really hurt me, and how can they think that way, and da da da. Well, yeah, it hurts you because you're living it, and you know the truth or the ramifications of that kind of ignorance or stigma. Yeah. But that person truly isn't intending that kind of pain on you. And these are great opportunities to educate somebody else. And so I take pride in those moments now when somebody comes to me and, might say something where I'm like, I try to look at it like, this person, obviously they don't know. So I'm going to take this time and teach them. And it's almost always very well received. You know, I get a lot of like, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, a lot of I'm sorry, I didn't realize. You know, and you got to kind of let your guard down a little bit. You know, in order to have these kind of conversations. I won't be here one day. My husband won't be here one day, but you know, other people will, and I want them to understand him. I want them to know him as a person. I want them to understand that there's a reason why he does the things that he does, and you know, me teaching others about him is just another way of, you know, taking care of him. You know, it kind of comes with the territory. Now, how long it takes you to accept that is another thing.
Yeah, boy, I'll tell you. I mean, just such great advice. I mean, I mean, just yeah, you're absolutely right. And it is a matter of perspective, isn't it? And I know that many may think, oh, that's an easy thing. And even for me, it was really difficult. I mean, that took me a lot of years to get to that place of acceptance and grace. But and I think it just kind of takes what it takes as well. But I mean, just so well put. In fact, I mean, this is something that you're so passionate about. You actually wrote a book. So I mean, so tell us how that came about. And I think the other real point that was the takeaway for me was that, you know, one day we're not going to be there, you know, for our children, but the world that they live in, to the extent that the world can understand what it's like to have autism, I mean, that's the legacy we can leave, you know, as well. So tell us what specifically you've done to kind of create that legacy for Noah, but ultimately, you know, for the world.
Yeah. So, you know, I feel like we've all gotten to a place where, you know, we talk about autism awareness. I feel like everybody is pretty aware.
Right. That's true.
You know,
awareness. Yeah.
we're beyond that.
Yeah.
Now I think we're at a place where, you know, true acceptance needs to start taking place.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, I've heard of that, you know, but it's another thing to say, I'm going to include your son, you know, I'm going to, in spite of our differences, you know, he matters and he's important and he has a voice in his school and his community and all of these things. And how all that really came about and came to the forefront of my mind was when Noah was in second grade, his younger sister Lydia went to school with him at his school. They happened to be in the same school. And I prepared Lydia to let her know, you know, your brother, he goes to a different classroom. And there's other kids like him in that classroom. And he rides on this kind of bus. And I had these conversations with her to kind of prepare her because, you know, I was worried that she was going to base what her school day would be like off of his. So I wanted her to know there was a difference.
Sure.
And it made me aware that, you know, most likely nobody else really has these conversations with their kids when they send them to school, that, you know, these classrooms and these kids are in there and there's a reason why. And I thought, but maybe we should, because they're all going to school together and they're all students together, and they play on the playground together. But, you know, I thought, you know, well, maybe, I don't know. So time went by and Lydia come home and she would tell me that the kids would ask a lot of questions about her brother. And I prepared for that. I knew that was going to come. But what Lydia would say was so profound to me. She'd say, you know, the kids ask me, why doesn't Noah talk? And why does Noah do this? And, you know, why is Noah, you know, yada, yada, yada. And I said, well, what do you tell them? And Lydia said, I just tell them that my brother is different and that's okay. And I was like, yeah. I mean, from the mouth of a kindergartner, it was just so easy.
Yeah.
And advice to her peers.
Yeah.
Oh, I can understand that. You know, we're all different. That's okay.
Yeah.
You know, how much more truth do you need? At the end of the day,
true.
we are all different, and that's the way it's supposed to be. So it really just these little scenarios in that particular school year really got the wheels turning in my mind, where I thought, you know, my son has been in this school since he was 3 years old, and he's in second grade now, and his peers still don't understand why he does the things that he does, or why he's in the classroom that he's in. And I thought, that's really not fair. And he's now in fourth grade, and and the fact that my daughter had to answer these questions regarding her brother, I thought, was such a disservice to the rest of the kids like Mel. So I started to dig a little bit deeper as to why these conversations weren't happening. And I started reaching out to my own friends, and I started encouraging them. I said, I think it's only fair for Noah's peers to understand him as he is right now, as a child, as a kid. They're all growing up together. I feel like so much awareness and acceptance is geared towards adults. Adults need to learn about autism too. But my son deserves to be understood right now by his peers right now. And so I reached out to my friends, and I tried to encourage them. I said, talk to your kids about autism. Talk to them about kids like mine. They're going to school together. They're in the community together. They're at your soccer practice, and they are at your places of worship. They're at your playground. They're at your pool. They're probably in your own family. Have these conversations. Well, I had a few reach back out to me and actually told me, they said, I can't teach my child something that I don't know anything about.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was such a honest.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's true.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't teach somebody something you don't know, you haven't lived or experienced. I wouldn't have been able to teach anybody about autism prior to Noah.
Mm-hmm.
So then I took it a step further, and I started digging to kind of point these people in the right direction, like a book or something along those lines. And I couldn't find anything geared towards, neurotypical children learn about their autistic peers. There was a lot of awareness books, for children on the spectrum, and there was a lot of books about, being different, and so, but nothing that really spoke directly to there is a reason why these peers do what they do, and then really open the door to have a conversation about it too. So that is what really was the foundation, and what formed the idea for my book, and our goal with the book, and it just was like a snowball effect from there. I mean, but it truly all just stemmed from my daughter coming home and telling me that, my son's classmates didn't understand him. And that, that made me sad.
Yeah. Man, I mean, so interesting. So the main character is Jacob in the book. So tell us how the story develops with Jacob. Tell us about Jacob as a character, and then also, do you have a? Can we see it? Can we see it? Yeah, that would
so we have here Jacob. This is Jacob.
Nice. Yeah.
And this is Sarah. So we chose to not name them after our own children because it would be confusing at home.
Sure.
But basically, what the reader experiences is Jacob and Sarah are twins. They're both in first grade. It follows them throughout their school day. Jacob is in a special education classroom on the spectrum, and Sarah goes to her gen ed classroom. So they both ride the bus to school, and when they get there, they split off into their appropriate classrooms. So as you're reading, it shows how they're both learning the same things, but they learn in different ways. And it just shows like the comparison that, that there's more than one way to learn, that being different is more than okay. But it really shines a light on what goes on in those other classrooms. And really opens the door for parents and teachers as well to read the book and then allow the child to ask questions about Jacob and his peers and their school day, and that was my main goal. Is I just really wanted children to have this type of autism representation within
Yep.
but an actual resource that never again can somebody come to me and say, I can't teach my child something I don't know anything about. And I just say, yes, you can. Here you go.
Dinosaur, absolutely.
Here you go. And I even took it a step further. At the end of the book, I put a resource guide in the back of the book. So it breaks down page by page all of Jacob and his classmates' behaviors, and it explains them in a way that the adult can understand. So they're learning as well, and then also gaining the knowledge to appropriately answer any questions that a child may have. So as well as I put some guided questions in there that help the child relate to Jacob and help them see that, although Jacob is different, at the end of the day, we're all just the same. We're all going to school to learn, and we want friends, and we all want to be included, and we all want to be accepted. We all want to feel safe, and we all want to feel loved. And these are all things that a child in elementary school can 100% identify with. And I found through the book, and really through the teacher community, so many were like, this is the book that I never realized I needed, and just heard so many stories. And then also from like a self-identifying standpoint, I've had a lot of autism parents tell me that they use the book to introduce to their child that they are on the spectrum.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Yeah,
or to give them a character that represents autism in a positive and a friendly way, but and in an honest way, but in a way that is appropriate for that age group.
I think that's so huge, right? I mean, self-acceptance is a big issue, right? Our parents wrestle with, well, when do I tell my child, what, and then how does that affect self-image? And that is what I really I so love about this. Not only is it, this is a tremendous resource for teachers. I mean, a tremendous classroom tool because of the guide, at the back, that's for conversation. Plus, the illustrations are amazing. When I first saw, this book, it was actually way before it was even published. It was actually just, it happened to be a Kickstarter project that started, which I highly recommend anyone that's watching this should really follow you and some of the other projects that you're working on. But that was, when I looked at it, I'm just like, this is it, and I bought it. Because I didn't even know when it was going to be delivered. And then all of a sudden this package comes in the mail. I'm like, this is just the coolest dang thing. I love it. I just love it. And as you know, on this webinar, we don't go out and really endorse other products. This one I absolutely would, because it's just so unique in that it does have that message, and it does have just the ability for self-acceptance. And there's another interesting part that you were mentioning specifically about a conversation between Sarah and Gracie as well. Why was that so meaningful? Where you're just like compelled to put that in your book, and also I think it's based on a true story too, right? Tell us about that.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that everything in the book is real. As down to the school day, down to Jacob eating spaghetti and meatballs with his hands.
Yeah.
Seeker and loves food. Everything about this is based off of my son and daughter in that particular school year. But one thing that it was hard for me to touch on, in the sense that the conversation that was had really tugged on my heartstrings. But then I quickly found out that it was a part of the book that a lot of other parents were very touched by as well. And I'm glad that I went and went ahead and put it in there. But there's part of the book where Sarah, she's in the lunchroom with her friend, and her friend has been watching Sarah's brother Jacob throughout the day, and kind of trying to wrap her mind around, Jacob is different. He does things different. I'm not really getting it. I don't understand. And they're sitting down at lunch, and Gracie asks her and says, I have a question for you. And Sarah says, okay. And Gracie says, how come your brother doesn't talk yet? And this was a real conversation that was had with my daughter and one of her peers. Yeah. And she says, he talks a little. He's still learning. And she says, well, why does he flap his hands like that? Why is he always jumping up and down? Yeah. And Gracie Dinosaur responds, Jacob has autism. I know he does things differently, but that's okay. And then very quickly, do you think Jacob would be my friend?
Yeah, so I love that.
That's a child's mind, though. They have these questions because at that age, especially, they're trying to really understand all the working parts of the world around them in a very literal sense.
Yeah.
If they see something that does not compare to everything else that they've seen, they're going to have questions. And I think it's important to answer those questions, especially at this age, because the questions are coming from a very honest and open heart, And I recognize that your brother does things differently. Why? Well, because he is different, and he has autism, and that's okay. And that's suffice enough, This book and this story, quickly after I released it, I realized that I had a pretty awesome opportunity to start taking it into the schools. Yeah. And started with one teacher inviting me, and then another teacher and another teacher. And I took it into the schools, and we would read the story, and I would allow the children to ask questions about the book. And unfolding right before my eyes was everything that I had truly hoped for, which was my son's peers to understand him as he is. And then as I started going to these schools and having these conversations with these kids, and I started to get feedback months later from teachers that our time together was having a positive effect, not only in the school, but when the kids were out in the community as well, the park and school. I thought, wow, what we experienced here at home that I turned into some dinosaurs, autism has now grown into this program where I now go in and I teach elementary age children about their autistic peers. And one time, as a matter of fact, I had a little girl, probably like third or fourth grade. She had come up to me after one of the assemblies, and she said, thank you so much for coming to my school and telling everyone I'm not weird. No. And I said, why would anyone say that you're weird? And she said, well, because I have autism too. Mm. And I thought, so awesome. Yeah, I just, it just broke my heart. But at the same time, I knew that this was, this was what I was meant to do, and so I'm glad that I allowed myself to be vulnerable with what was going on in my home, what was going on with my children. And, the dinosaurs kind of mask that vulnerability. But at the end of the day, these are real feelings and real things that took place, but are now is just cultivated into this just wonderful education. And I can't wait to see how much more it's going to grow and what more will come of it. And I really feel like this has become my life's calling.
Yeah. I just so love it. Okay, so where can we get it? Where can we get Jake when the flapping dinosaur? Where can we get it?
Well, on our website.
Okay.
Our website, thenoahrobertproject.com.
Okay. The Noah Robert. And so what we'll do is we'll make sure that when this is posted, that there'll be a link, there as well. So again, the noahrobertproject.com.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Love it. So best place to grab that. So, thank you so much I mean, just for taking the time and explaining, your journey with autism. I mean, it just Noah sounds like just an amazing young man, as your other children as well, and just the mere fact that you're able to document that story of your family, and then be able to share that with others, that really is extraordinary because it is such an isolating thing. And I want to acknowledge you for that. And again, say very much thank you, for that as well.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me and all that you guys are doing for the community. And I mean, you and Tyler are so respected, and your efforts have been so far reaching. I mean, it's inspiring. It's
Yeah.
absolutely inspiring. And watching Tyler, and learning more about him has just really made me respect you guys all that much more. And I think it's great.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, oftentimes I say, I mean, I just kind of Tyler. He's the one that is just, he really truly is amazing. I mean, all I can do is just support him the best way that I know how. But yeah, his journey really has been extraordinary, and he's an extraordinary just human being.
Mm-hmm.
As a dad, it's like you're like I learn things from him every day that just make me a better man, right? Make me a better father. And so thank you for those very kind words. I really do appreciate that. And Tyler does as well, as he's traveling this week. So with that, thank you for every one of you in the audience as well for being part of Questions About Autism Answers at Work, especially the parent interview series. And yeah, I really encourage you, go take a look at Hollybook. Jacob the Flapping Dinosaur is fantastic. We'll make sure that link is there. You're going to find that, especially in the area of self-acceptance for your child that has autism, and then your ability to use that as a tool for acceptance in the community, and especially your schools. You've got to tell the teachers about this, I mean, because it really is just an amazing tool. So with that, again, thank you, and we'll look forward to catching up with you next week.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.